Continuing on our work about observations and writing observations, we're going to look at some specific aphorisms drawn from your fables that you wrote last week as a way of thinking about how to go about writing observations. So here on the board, you can see a whole list of sentences. These are sentences from your very own essays. I don't know if it's easy to read them or not on the screen, but I'll read them out loud nevertheless. We have the first one, differences make us special. Please notice that's a really good thought. All of the aphorisms that I've been reading in your essays are good thoughts. Some of them are true, some of them are good advice. They're certainly worth my time and attention. Some of them are more familiar than others, but I think can't be emphasized enough how cool it is that we can start with 7 quick sentences in 5 minutes and that you guys can come up with ideas that are worthy, ideas that are true, ideas that give us pause and make us think. Differences do make us special. They're really important. And in this tumultuous time of Black Lives Matter, of polarized politics, I think the culture, by and large, a lot of us are working with how do we both find our tribe and the people that are our people, but also how do we celebrate, how do we tolerate, how do we learn from differences in all of our communities and all of our world. So let's not, it's an aphorism. It came out of a fable. I think it was Bear and Lion, actually. But please notice, these are thoughts we're thinking about. And I say that because in this class, an essay writing class, we want to write about thoughts that matter. We want to discover the shapes of our thought that are more worth our attention than others. We want to hold up writing that's thoughtful or provocative or worth all of the work that we've put into it. So we're constantly going to be looking, reading, saying out loud, thinking, looking for strong thoughts that are worth our attention and are worth helping to grow and put out into the world. So kudos to you guys. I was very pleased with the morals that you were able to come up with. There were some really interesting, strong, satisfying aphorisms. So here's another one. Don't be an envious person. Yeah, don't. It's silly. Don't be jealous. It's tacky. It's a waste of energy. It makes you grumpy. It brings you down. Good advice. Don't envy others. Everyone is the same in some way. I love that. Here, we're sorting for difference. Here in the third aphorism, we're sorting for sameness. Do I not have red blood? Do I not bleed like any other man? Those are other statements that have shown up that there is a deep commonality in the human life force that we share. For all of our very differences, we also could sort for things that unite us, that bind us, that we care. Again, true, smart, worth thinking about, has huge implications for how we vote, how we purchase, how we teach our kids. Do you look for differences and celebrate what makes us special? Or do we look for similarities to bind us in community? Or is there a constant tension between the two? Please note, this was a punctuation exercise, and your aphorisms are bringing us into the very substance of political thought, of social theory, of some pretty big decisions that are going on in protests around the country right now and in voting booths in a few weeks. Enemies sometimes can forgive. That's true. And what's that mean about our enemies? Be aware of your surroundings. Good advice. Don't get lost in your thoughts. Put down your cell phone, you idiot. You almost bumped into me. How has the awareness of our surroundings shifted these days? How is the challenge of being sequestered or put in all these little boxes limited our surroundings? And what are its limitations? How can I be aware of teaching on this little screen? How can I be aware of you guys when I'm not even in your presence? Surroundings have changed and awareness has to change. I don't look for hellos anymore in the hallway. Yo, Captain Kirk, sup? I look for blinks in a discussion board that somebody has a question that I haven't answered yet. So awareness has shifted and changed. Again, this is a really kind of common sense, good advice. But in our current situation, it's good advice that has shifted in so many different ways. And then last but not least, during times of help, you can always rely on a friend who is present. Now that's a really long one, and it's like troubled times and rely on a friend, but the friend is present. I just think it's an interesting one. I have to think on it. I don't quite get it. It's a complicated thought I want to think on more, but it's another example of a thought that was drawn out of a silly conversation between, I don't know, a unicorn and a horse, or a crab and a fish swimming in her little swimmy pool. All right, these are all your aphorisms. Let me just go over them quickly. And while I read them through, I want you to think about which one you think is most interesting to you today. If you could only have one of these thoughts, which one would you pick, or which one would you spend time on? Difference makes us special. Don't be an envious person. Everyone's the same in some way. Enemies sometimes can forgive. Be aware of your surroundings. During times of help, you can always rely on a friend who is present. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, I talked about a couple of these. I think if I had to pick 3 of them, I kind of like this one. Enemies sometimes can forgive. There's something about that I find to be a little bit more novel for the moment. Difference make us special. Well, I like that, but we've talked about it. Don't be an envious person. That's a good one, but I kind of know that. Jealousy is not bad, but it's good advice. Everyone is the same in some way. That's kind of like that one. So I'm really curious about this one. Be aware of your surroundings. I sort of like that because I think our surroundings has changed. And then during times of help, you can always rely on a friend. This one I'm intrigued with because I don't quite understand it completely. And it's long, but I'd want to think about it. So of those, what did I have? 6. 3 to Captain Kirk this afternoon seem, I don't know, just a little bit worth my attention today. I'm always looking for what's stronger. That's not to diminish what's less strong, but things bubble up because I'm interested, because it's hot and sticky today in the rain. There's all kinds of reasons that things stick out on a particular time. Part of our work is to notice what has a claim to your attention, what is worth your focus of the moment. So for our purposes, I winnowed it down to 3. And now if I have to just pick one to work on, aware of your surroundings during times of help, enemies can sometimes forgive. Well, just because for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to pick this one because that last one's got too many words in it. And surroundings, I kind of already talked about. So I'm just going to pick one of these aphorisms. When we choose to write observations, we have to pick right away, what are we going to write observations on? Where are the strong sentences? What part of the idea is worth our focuses? Enemies sometimes can forgive. All right, so that's the sentence. And so to write observations on a sentence, just this, what can we say about this little sentence? Well, I'm going to say that you can write observations by starting with the thought, I noticed that. And observations often start with the most obvious thing. Never be afraid of stating something that's obvious, because writing that out really gets us going. And also sometimes it's not as obvious to me as it may be to you. Enemies sometimes can forgive. So here's some observations that I can make about this. I'm doing blue. That I can make about this aphorism. Enemies sometimes can forgive. This sentence is short. I noticed that this sentence is short. 1, 2, 3, 4. It has 4 words. It has only 4 words. Enemies sometimes can forgive. The 2 most important words in the aphorism are enemies and forgive. Are the 2 most important words. I notice. The other ones are just kind of working words. Enemies is a strong word. And enemies is usually a negative word. I don't like my enemies. They anger me. They hurt me. Enemies are something to be avoided. Enemies are those that put me down. They're dangerous. Enemies are usually dangerous. And yet enemies are usually tied with the issue of harm. That's what makes the word strong. So I'm just jotting words down. But when you're writing observations, we're going to challenge ourselves to write in whole sentences. This sentence is short. Enemies and forgive are the two most powerful words. Enemy is a strong word with negative, dangerous, and harm as connected to the idea of enemies. Okay, another observation I can make is forgive is pleasant. To forgive is a positive idea. Forgiving is moral or spiritual. When people forgive, it comes from the heart. Enemies we attack with their bodies. Forgiveness comes from our hearts. Jesus was so powerful because Jesus, in the Christian tradition, tells people that we should forgive our enemies. Forgiveness is part of, it shows up again and again and again in the Quran. It shows up in the Hindu corpus of the Vedas. Forgiveness is a spiritual discipline that shows up in religion after religion after religion. Enemies are part of the war vocabulary. Forgiveness is part of the spiritual vocabulary. Enemies are tied to hurt. Forgiveness is tied to healing. I notice that enemies and forgiveness don't usually go together. This aphorism is interesting because it's showing an exceptional thing about enemies that we don't really think about. We don't really think that there could be the hidden quality that an enemy could forgive. Or maybe the aphorism's also asking us to also think about we should maybe forgive some of our enemies, or that our worst enemies are maybe forgivable. I wonder how. There's people that are easier for me to forgive than others, let me tell you. And I don't really want to forgive my enemies. Gosh darn it all. I'll get them at the voting booth. Okay, now I just went on for quite a few minutes talking very, very specifically about this short sentence. Some of my observations were really technical. I counted the words. I noticed it was short. I tried to find words that had stronger power and lesser power. So those are strategies you can use when you write observations. Some of my observations were a little bit more conceptual. I actually used my observations to think about the idea of enemies, to explore how it works. I used my observations to think about forgiveness and to explore that thought. And how interesting that by putting these two things together that are usually so separate, this aphorism is helping us think about exceptions, helping us think about challenging exceptions. Things aren't always as obvious as they seem on the surface. Sometimes our enemies will forgive us. That's not how we think of them. Perhaps sometimes we can extend a healing heart where we want to punch the jerk in the face. This is an interesting, very provocative aphorism because it's getting us to think beneath the surface of things. So I'm really good at this, writing observations. Guess why? Bachelor's, 2 masters, and a PhD in English literature, philosophy, and religion. So, guys, I know when I do it, it seems like it's so easy because, I've been doing this for a while. For you, observations will be one of the most challenging things. But for the moment, as you're thinking about writing them, just know anytime you're writing observations, you can always start with the sentence, I noticed that. and start with the most obvious and use your observations to focus your attention on specifics within a word, a paragraph, or a whole essay. Writing observations, an exciting, new, and really useful skill. So we'll be doing this lots. See ya.